"Honey, I introduce you Jessica. This is the woman I really love." David pronounced these words while Mary still held her newborn baby on her lap, just 3 days after a painful cesarean section that had left her with stitches burning in her belly. The blonde beside him smiled with a cruelty disguised kindly. "Hi, Maria. It's nothing personal, but David finally found someone who really completes him." Maria Delgado, 28, had spent 6 years of her life trying to get pregnant. 6 years of expensive hormonal treatments paid with your nurse salary, medical appointments that consumed their economies, and hopes shattered month after month. When she finally got it, she thought her family was complete. He never imagined that his son's birth would be the sign for David to ask for divorce. "You did your part, gave me an heir," David continued with a coldness that cut deeper than any scalpel. "Now we can follow our lives separately. Jessica and I want to formalize our relationship." The apartment in Los Angeles, which Maria had decorated so lovingly during her pregnancy, spending every extra penny on second-hand furniture that she renovated after double shifts in the hospital, now seemed like a prison. Each object there represented a lie. Each photo on the wall showed a man who never really existed. David had been his colleague at the Faculty of Administration, the only one who showed genuine interest in the studious Philippine girl, as he used to say. She abandoned nursing to support her promising business that never left the paper, working double shifts while he developed important contacts. Maria watched Jessica by examining the decorative look, as a buyer inspecting a property. Her high heels clicked on the laminate floor as she walked through the living room, clearly feeling at home. His perfectly painted nails pointed to objects as if planning a complete redecoration. "David told me that you are a nurse," said Jessica with a condescending tone that made each word sound like a calculated offense. "How beautiful. You should earn well for a Philippine. I imagine that now that you have fulfilled your biological function, you can go back to your night shifts." The word was spoken as if it were an unpleasant medical diagnosis. Maria squeezed the baby against her chest, feeling a mixture of physical pain from cesarean section and a much deeper emotional pain tearing her inside. David walked around the house with a disturbing resourcefulness, taking some personal effects as if making a planned change for a long time. He avoided looking directly at the baby, as if the child was just another item on a list of tasks. "Look, David," said Jessica, taking a picture of the honeymoon in her handiculated hands. "You really got stuck in this situation for a long time. Good thing you can now live your true life." Maria remembered the nights when she arrived exhausted from the hospital and found David playing video games, complaining that she didn't pay enough attention to her business projects. The accounts always came to his name. The loans were guaranteed with his salary, but the successful dreams were always his. What neither knew was that Mary had found the messages between them 3 weeks before delivery. Not just romantic messages, but detailed conversations about how to get rid of Asian luggage as soon as the baby was born. He had read each "I love you" sent to Jessica, every cruel plan they made for the future, every racist joke about the Philippine wife who finally fulfilled her reproductive purpose. Jessica had written, "At least she gave you a blonde son with blue eyes. Imagine if she came out pulling her Asian genes." David had responded with laughter emojis and added, "Lucky for me. Now I can have the child without the mother." She had silently cried in the hospital bathroom during labor, but something had changed her at that moment. The pain had forged a cold determination like steel. Among the contractions, she had made a decision that would change everything. "I'm going to get my things," David announced, heading for the room like a passing hotel. "Jessica, can you start seeing what you want to stay in the apartment? Tomorrow we talk to the lawyer about the papers." Jessica laughed, a crystal clear laugh. "Don't worry, Maria. I'll take good care of all this here. And David too, of course." Maria remained motionless on the couch, gently packing the baby who slept alien to the storm around her. On the outside, it looked like a destroyed, vulnerable woman, defeated by the circumstances. But his eyes revealed something very different, a disturbing calm of those who had already drawn every movement of a meticulous plan. During the last 3 months of pregnancy, Wanto David thought she worked extra shifts for money. Maria had been busy with something very different. Each document he signed distractedly, each account she organized to him, every investment he made on behalf of the two, everything had been carefully filed and documented. While Jessica commented on exchanging furniture with cheap Asian taste for something more sophisticated and American, Mary mentally reviewed the documents she had secretly photographed, the bank accounts she had discovered, the professional secrets David thought she kept so well. The baby moved in his arms and Mary whispered a silent promise that neither managed to hear. "You will never need to be ashamed of your inheritance, my love. Mom will guarantee that." What David and Jessica didn't know was that underestimating a Philippine nurse who worked double shifts to support a entrepreneur husband for 6 years would be the biggest mistake of her lives. They had no idea they were facing someone used to saving lives under pressure, making crucial decisions in seconds and never giving up a fight. While they planned their future together in that room, Maria had already put in motion something that would transform that moment of supreme humiliation at the beginning of the most spectacular fall Los Angeles had ever seen. In his seemingly submissive silence, there was a storm forming that he would leave permanent scars in those who dared to underestimate the strength of a Philippine mother protecting her son. If you're enjoying this twisting story, don't forget to subscribe to the channel, because what Maria planned will leave you jaw-dropped. In the following days, the house that Maria had turned home became a psychological battlefield. David came back only to get his things, always accompanied by Jessica, who made a point of commenting on every detail of the decoration as if she were a buyer evaluating a property in settlement. "Seriously, David, I don't know how you endured to live here for so long," said Jessica, passing her finger on the shelf of nursing books that Maria had collected over the years. "Everything is so basic." Maria breastfed the baby on the couch, pretending not to hear as they openly discussed plans for the apartment. David had begun to receive attorney's calls, discussing division of goods as if it were invisible. "The good news is that she is not entitled to much," David said on the phone, walking around the room without caring that Maria was there. "Marriage and partial communion, but she never contributed financially. The apartment is in my name." What he didn't know was that each word was being recorded by Maria's cell phone, discreetly positioned between the couch pillows. During her double shifts at the hospital, she had learned that careful documentation could mean the difference between life and death, and now she would apply this lesson in a very different way. Jessica had settled in the kitchen like a confident invasive, reorganizing the cabinets and throwing away the Philippine seasonings Maria wore to cook. "These spices smell such a strong," he murmured, pouring whole bottles into the trash. "I don't know how you could eat this strange food, David." During the early hours when David slept in hotels with Jessica, Maria worked on her plan. It was not only anger that moved her, but a calculated coldness she had developed for years, saving lives in emergency situations. Every insult, every racist commentary, every humiliation was carefully cataloged and filed. His sister Lisa called San Francisco every day. "Maria, leave with the baby. Come live with me until you organize yourself," begged. But Maria knew that running away would be exactly what David expected, that she would silently disappear as a good submissive immigrant. "I don't go anywhere," Mary answered, with a determination that made Lisa worry even more. One Saturday, Jessica brought a friend to meet the house. The two laughed loudly as they flipped in photo albums from Maria's family in the Philippines. "Look at these people," said the friend. "They look so primitive." Maria was feeding the baby in her room when she heard Jessica answers, "Yeah, David finally woke up to life. Imagine raising a child in this late cultural environment." At that moment, something crystallized in Mary's mind. It wasn't just about David and Jessica. It was about every Philippine patient that she had seen being mistreated in the hospital, every colleague who had been passed back because she didn't have the American profile right, every time someone had spoken slowly to her, assuming she didn't understand English perfectly. David had begun to press for her to sign the divorce papers quickly. "The more you take, the more complicated it will be," says it was, swinging the documents in front of it. "My lawyer said that if you do not collaborate, you may even lose shared custody." It was a lie, and Maria knew this because of the years she had worked in the pediatric sector, seeing cases of custody. But David didn't know she knew. He continued to underestimate the Philippine nurse who had sustained his failed dreams for 6 years. Jessica had begun to post photos of the apartment on her social networks, marking David and writing subtitles like, "Finally at home," and "Starting our real life together." Each post was a public choke in Mary's dignity, but also more evidence for the collection she had been setting methodically. In the 4th week, David arrived with an insulting financial proposal. "Look, Maria, I'll be generous. You can get $5,000 and your clothes. The rest stays with me. It's more than you could do in court." Maria looked at the paper, then to David and finally to Jessica, who smiled victoriously in the corner of the room. "I need time to think," he said calmly. "Time for what?" exploded Jessica. "David is being more than fair to you. In fact, it's being too generous." That night, after they went out for dinner and posting more provocative photos on social networks, Maria opened her laptop and started typing. Not an answer to the divorce proposal, but something much more devastating. What David and Jessica didn't know was that underestimating a Philippine nurse who had spent 6 years documenting every lie, every hidden account, every tax cheat he had committed, would be the most expensive decision of his lives. They were about to find that the woman who considered an easy victim had, in fact, methodically built the most solid case that any divorce lawyer had ever seen. As they celebrated their apparent victory, Maria ended the last detail of a plan that would transform that humiliation into a lesson Los Angeles would never forget about the true meaning of underestimating a mother's silent strength protecting her future. While David and Jessica celebrated their victory with expensive dinners posted on social networks, Maria had begun to put into practice something they would never expect from a simple Philippine nurse. During her nights of insomnia, while breastfeeding the baby, she was not wasting time with self-pity. Instead, he opened his laptop and worked on something that would make that humiliation look like a child's play compared to what was coming. Her sister Lisa finally managed to visit Los Angeles, arriving on a flight of San Francisco with a Philippine determination that David had completely underestimated. Lisa was a corporate lawyer, which specializes in financial fraud, and when she saw the conditions in which Maria was living, her anger was instantaneous. "Maria, show me everything you have about this worm," said Lisa, opening her own workbook at the kitchen table where Jessica had thrown away the Philippines days before. Maria presented her collection of evidence as a nurse would present a medical record, organized, detailed, and devastatingly complete. Each text message, every photo of social networks, every financial document that David had signed distractedly was there, cataloged by date and relevance. "My God, Mary," whispered Lisa, flipping through the documents. He had no idea who he was moving, right? David continued his visits to press for the signing of divorce papers, always accompanied by Jessica, who had begun redecorating the house as if they were already hers. They had painted over the family photos that Maria had hung, replacing them with a more American decoration, as Jessica liked to say. "Look, Maria," said David on a Thursday, shaking the papers impactly, "my patience has a limit. You're being stubborn to nothing. You soon accept this proposal that I'm still generous." Jessica added with that poisonous smile she had perfected, "David, she is clearly trying to blackmail us emotionally. It's typical of these more dramatic cultures." What they didn't know was that each word was being recorded by Lisa's phone, discreetly positioned between the baby's toys. As a lawyer, she knew exactly what evidence it would be needed to completely destroy the narrative that David would try to build in court. During these weeks, Maria found that David had been lying about much more than just a fare. The business opportunities he pursued with her money were, in fact, pyramid schemes in which he had lost almost every economies of the couple. "He owes more than $80,000 in credit cards he opened in his name," explained Lisa, reviewing bank statements. "And look this here. He declared you as a dependent on his company to get tax benefits, but never paid you an official salary." With each revelation, Maria felt a mixture of anger and gratitude. Anger at systematic betrayal, gratitude for finally having an ally who understood exactly how to turn every David lie into a sharp legal weapon. Jessica had begun to post photos of the baby on her social networks, referring to him as "our son" in subtitles that made Maria's stomach to turn. One of the photos showed Jessica holding the baby with the caption, "Finally a complete family, far from toxic influences." "She is building a case of parental alienation," Lisa explained. "But it's also giving us evidence that you are trying to appropriate your child's mother's identity. This will be useful." David had begun to bring friends to meet the house, introducing Jessica as the new owner of the place, while Maria was in the bedroom with the baby. The high laughs and comments about finally having a real American woman echoed through the house she had turned into home. One night after David and Jessica left for one of her public celebrations, Maria and Lisa sat on the floor of the room, surrounded by documents, with the baby sleeping between them. "Maria, do you know what we have here?" said Lisa, organizing the evidence in careful batteries. "It is not just a case of divorce. It is financial fraud, misappropriation, documented racial discrimination, and attempted parental alienation." Mary looked at her sister with a calm that made Lisa understand why David had so drastically underestimated the woman she thought to know. "Lisa, I don't just want to divorce him. I want him to understand the real cost of humiliating a Philippine mother who spent 6 years supporting her failed dreams." While David posted champagne photos on social networks, celebrating his freedom and real life with Jessica, he didn't know that each post was being screenshot and added to the growing evidence file that would prove his financial and emotional irresponsibility. What David and Jessica didn't know was that underestimating a Philippine nurse who had spent 6 years documenting every lie, every irresponsible spending, every fiscal cheating, would be just the first of a series of calculation errors that would lead them to such a spectacular fall that it would become legend in Los Angeles. That night, as they toasted their apparent victory, Maria finished the last details of a plan that would transform that humiliation into a lesson about underestimating a mother's silent strength, protecting not only her son, but her dignity and her cultural heritage. The following Monday, David woke up with dozens of notifications on his cell phone. His first reaction was of irritation, until they saw what it was. Process for tax fraud, misappropriation and parental alienation powered by Maria Delgado against David Chen and Jessica Morrison. The legal document had been sent to all your professional contacts, including clients and co-workers. "What the hell is this?" David shouted, shaking Jessica awake. "She can't do that. There's no money for a lawyer." Jessica, still sleepy, took her own cell phone and her face pale instantly. His social networks were being bombarded with messages and comments in all the photos he had posted from the apartment and the baby. "David, look at that," he said with a tremendous voice. "Someone is sharing prints from our private conversations. How did anyone get our messages?" In Lisa's law firm, Maria watched everything unfold with the calm of a nurse monitoring vital signs during critical surgery. Each reaction, every panic, every desperate attempt at damage control was exactly what it had predicted. "The prints of racist messages among them already have more than 50,000 shares," reported Lisa, monitoring social networks in real time. "And look," David's co-workers began to speak up. "It looks like he had a history of discriminatory comments in the office as well." David desperately tried to control the damage by calling all customers to explain the situation. But Maria had been strategic. Legal documents included detailed evidence of each tax fraud he had committed using her name. "Mr. Chen," said his assistant on the phone, "the company's accountant Morrison and Associates called canceling the project. They said something about not wanting to associate with someone under investigation for racial discrimination." Jessica had locked in the apartment bathroom, trying to frantically deleting social networking posts, but it was too late. Every picture of her referring to the baby as "our son" had been screenshot and was being used as evidence of attempted parental alienation. "David, my mother is calling me non-stop," he shouted from the bathroom. "My parents saw the news online. They are furious." The situation worsened when David's boss called Tuesday. "Chen, I need to see you in my office. Now." The voice was cold and admitted no discussion. When David came to work, he found the human resources team waiting for him with a pile of documents. It was not just the public accusations. They were testimonials from colleagues who finally felt comfortable reporting years of discriminatory comments he made in the office. "Mr. Chen," said HR's director, "3 staff of the company have brought formal complaints about racist comments you have done over the years. We have internal email records and witnesses." What David didn't know was that Mary had meticulously documented not only her financial fraud, but also her lies for customers. The contracts he signed by promising services he could not deliver. The early payments he diverted to personal spending. Each lie had been catalogued with the accuracy of a medical record. "There is also the question of the false expenses you have submitted," continued the director, sliding documents around the table. $47,000 in fraudulent reimbursements in the last 2 years. On Wednesday, David lost his largest client when prints of his messages to Jessica were leaked, including one where he boasted to curl the Filipino client for another 6 months because they are always very polite to complain. The client in question, Mr. Santos, was the owner of a chain of Philippine restaurants in Los Angeles. Not only did he cancel the 200,000 contracts, but also posted a public statement about the importance of choosing business partners that respect all cultures. "This cannot be happening," David muttered, walking in circles through the apartment that now seemed like a prison. "She's just a nurse. How did she get it all?" Jessica had begun to receive calls from former co-workers asking if the accusations of racial discrimination were true. His professional reputation as marketing manager was crumbling in real time. "Jessica Morrison celebrates separating baby from Asian mother in public posts," read the headline of a Los Angeles gossip blog that had discovered her social networks. The screen catches of their cruel posts were being shared massively. On Thursday, the most devastating blow arrived through David's lawyer. "Mr. Chen, the fiscal situation is serious. IRS is investigating not only your personal statements, but as well as you used married status to reduce taxes while keeping accounts secret." David found that Mary had provided the tax authorities every document she proved that she had declared her as a dependent for tax benefits, but had never shared the real income or the expenses she made with her money. "David, I need to tell you something," said Jessica on a Thursday, with bags ready at the entrance. "My parents gave me an ultimatum. Either I get away from this situation, or they cut my fiduciary background." It was at this moment that David noticed the true extension of Mary's plan. It was not just about divorce. It was about complete justice for 6 years of systematic humiliation. "In addition," continued Jessica, avoiding looking at him, "my boss said the company can't associate with someone involved in racial scandals. I'm being invited to fire me." David watched Jessica leave, taking not only her things but also the expensive furniture they had bought with the money diverted from his joint accounts and Maria. She didn't even say goodbye properly, just murmured something about not being able to afford to be dragged down. On Friday, the final blow arrived. Lisa had managed to freeze all David bank accounts through a court injunction, claiming that the money had been obtained through fraud using Mary's name. "Mr. Chen," said the bank manager over the phone, "all his accounts were frozen. Federal investigation for tax evasion. You will need to attend IRS on Monday." The apartment was now empty and silent. Jessica had taken everything she considered valuable, leaving only the furniture that Maria had bought with her own money years earlier. David looked around and realized that he was literally surrounded by the ghosts of his life with Mary, alone, without money, without clients, without Jessica, and facing federal investigation. David finally understood that he had completely underestimated the simple Philippine nurse who sustained his failed dreams for 6 years. That night, he tried call Maria. The phone rang once before going straight to the mailbox. The message was clear and sharp. "You had 6 years to treat me with dignity. Now you have a lifetime to learn the consequences of not having done it." While David prepared to face the legal and financial consequences of his actions, something even more devastating was awaiting him. Mary had not only destroyed her gift, she had meticulously built a future that would fall only to the beginning of a lesson that would echo for Los Angeles about the true cost of underestimating a mother's determination, protecting her son, and her dignity. What David did not know was that the storm that had destroyed his life was only the first movement of a symphony of justice that would transform that initial humiliation into a legend about how true strength is not of cruelty, but of the unshakable dignity of those who refuse to accept injustice as destiny. 6 months later, Maria was sitting on the porch of her new home in Pasadena, a large garden property where the baby could play safely, away from the toxicity that had marked her first months of life. The afternoon sun illuminated the architectural design spread over the table, projects of a community clinic that it was projecting to serve immigrant families in Los Angeles. The transformation had been spectacular. After the evidence of tax fraud and racial discrimination became public, Maria had received work offers from 3 different architectural offices. She chose to start her own business, which specializes in community projects, and in a few months, she already had a waiting list of customers who admired not only her talent, but her resistance story. "Aunt Maria is on TV again," shouted his niece from the interior of the house, where he watched local news. Maria smiled, adjusting the baby on her lap. Its history had become a symbol of resistance in the Philippine community of Los Angeles, inspiring other immigrant women not to accept discriminatory treatments. She had been invited to talk to universities, appeared in podcasts about female entrepreneurship, and her architecture Instagram had over 100,000 followers. Lisa had moved to Los Angeles to manage the legal aspects of the exponential growth of Mary's business. They had transformed that traumatic experience into a platform to help other women in similar situations, offering free legal advice for divorce cases involving financial fraud. "The lawsuit against David was finalized today," said Lisa, arriving with a document folder and a satisfied smile. "He will pay pension for 18 years, plus damage to tax fraud and misappropriation. Total, $420,000. Maria shook her head, more relieved than vindictive. "And Jessica?" He lost his job, was sued by his own company for damage to the corporate image, and is living with his parents in Nebraska. It seems that the family's fiduciary fund was frozen for scandal-related fiscal reasons. Lisa laughed. Irony of fate. The baby had begun to walk, and his first words were a mixture of English and Tagalog, just as Mary had planned. She made sure that he would grow proud of his Philippine heritage, something David had tried to erase systematically for years. David, in turn, had lost absolutely everything. Without clients, no money, facing federal investigation, he had tried to reconcile not only with Maria, but with several former clients who had discovered their fraud through the public exposure of the case. His desperate contact attempts were automatically blocked by the legal system Lisa had implemented. He tried to apply for a job at Mr. Santos yesterday, Lisa told, referring to businessman Filipino, that he had canceled the $200,000 contract with David. Obviously, it was rejected on time. The irony was delicious. David, who had been joking on the Asian Contact Network, found in the worst possible way that the Philippine community of Los Angeles was not only prosperous and influential, but also had a very long memory for issues of racial discrimination. Maria had received a proposal from a publisher to write a book about her experience. The provisional title was The Nurse Who Healed Her Own Life, A Story of Justice and Start. Film rights were already being negotiated by a value that would make David cry if he knew. "Do you know what satisfies me most?" Maria said to Lisa, watching the baby play in the garden. It is not seeing David suffering the consequences. It is knowing that our son will grow seeing that his mother has never agreed to be treated as less than deserved. The community clinic that Maria was projecting would be inaugurated next year, offering free medical and legal services to immigrant families. The project had received funding from an international human rights foundation, impressed by its history of resistance and overcoming. Jessica had tried to reconcile through social media messages, claiming that she had been influenced by David and asking a second chance to show that she was not really racist. The messages were screenshot and added to the evidence file that Lisa kept if there was a need for future processes. "The best part," said Lisa, showing news on the tablet, "is that your story has inspired changes in state legislation on financial protection for spouses victims of fraud." Maria smiled, thinking of all women who would benefit from these changes in the future. His pain had turned into purpose, his humiliation into strength to others in similar situations. That night, while putting the baby to sleep, Maria reflected on the journey she had traveled. 12 months earlier, she was an exhausted nurse supporting the failed dreams of an ungrateful husband. Today, he was a respected businesswoman, a powerful voice in the community, and especially a mother who had guaranteed her son to grow up in an environment where her cultural heritage would be celebrated, not hidden. David had tried to reduce her to a stereotype, the submissive Philippine wife that would exist only to serve her purposes. Instead, she had become just the opposite, a woman who turned her pain in power, her injustice in justice to others, and her apparent defeat in the most complete victory that Los Angeles had witnessed in years. The lesson was clear and powerful. Underestimating a Philippine woman who worked for years to support someone else's dreams is not just a calculation error. It is a guarantee that you will find out, in the most painful way possible, the true meaning of the phrase, "the best revenge is successful success." If this story of justice, overcoming, and intelligent revenge has touched your heart, be sure to subscribe to the channel for more stories that prove that sometimes karma needs a little help from ours to do justly spectacular justice.